Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are checking out, and not really checking out, but it's more of a tutorial actually on the plane I fly in real life, which is the Cessna 152. Now I'm going to be going through and showcasing all the different features of this aircraft, which is the Carenado C-152, 2 for X-Plane 10, with the NHadrian improvement mod installed. So I'm going to be walking everyone through how to start this airplane, fly this airplane. We're going to be flying a couple little circles around this airport, and I'll go through basically the basics on how to fly this airplane, and anything else you may need to know when learning how to fly a Cessna. So let's go ahead and start by pulling up the important flight documents here. So let's open up our checklist here. So here we have our livery information, and we're flying N11251, which is actually, in real life, a bush-wheeled version of a 152. But in the simulator here, we're flying with what's more realistic to what I fly, which is an aerobat, which means it has windows on the ceiling, and it does not have the bush wheels. So I'm going to be going into detail on that. So let's go ahead and pull open our checklist now. So here's all the specification about this aircraft, airworthiness, and all that. So everything you may need on here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these back where they're supposed to go. I think I'm supposed to. Yeah, all right. So that's back where it's supposed to go now. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the window here, like you would in real life. So let's go ahead and open the door here, and let's go ahead and start the pre-flight checklist. Now, I'm going off memory here because the C-152-2, to my knowledge, does not have a built-in checklist anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how I would pre-flight this aircraft in real life. First, let's put that hood back on there. So here we go. The plane's on its chocks. So first thing we want to do here is to remove those chocks. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And now we're going to return back into the inside of the airplane and make sure the parking brake is set. So now what you want to do is go back outside. So now the first thing we want to test would be to see whether the stall horn works. So let's see if I can get that working here. It's been on and off. Right, first you got to start the battery. So we'll do that here. So first release the control lock, then turn on the battery and alternator. This is just temporarily, by the way. So now we're gonna go ahead and hit the stall horn, which is up here. And you can see that it is actually working, because it does actually apply the stick shaker, which you can see when the rudder moves backwards. So there we have confirmation that it's working. So now we're gonna go back in here and we're gonna shut down the batteries. And this is because we still need to pre-flight some other stuff before we go ahead to engine start. The first thing you want to do now is kind of go the walk around of the aircraft. Make sure that there are no, like any cracks that are visible that haven't been patched yet, or any other issues with the airplane. So that's the first step. Go ahead and do your walk around. Alright, so that was a ridiculously quick walk around, but since it's in the simulator, I can't exactly simulate everything I would in real life. But we can come pretty close. So now you want to check the fuel levels, which you would do by popping off this cap. Now normally you have a dipstick to put in, but we can just fuel up the airplane like you would fuel it up in real life. So we're going to go ahead and check our fuel meter here. Right. And it seemed to be set. There is no actual fuel meter on this aircraft. What you do want to be looking for is that the weight changes. So now that it's fueled, it's gone. It doesn't actually fuel up that fast. It takes around the same time as fueling up a car. So now what we want to do is go ahead and close our doors. That's the first step, now that we've finished the outside checklist. Now we want to move on to the inside. So first, let's go ahead and start the master and the alternator. Now, before engines start, we have to also check the pitot heat, which I didn't do in the outside checklist. But keep that in mind if you're actually flying a 152. The pitot heat would normally be checked by holding your hand up to this little thingy over here. Alright, rudder check. Let's check our controls here. Alright, so now that we've checked our controls, now we want to do the next thing, which is the startup checklist. So first, make sure that all your systems here are powered on like they're supposed to be. You can see now that our GTN 650 from Garmin is powered up and displaying the right units. So now we want to check that the takt time and the Hobbs time on this aircraft are actually accurate. Now, this is my first time flying this airplane's livery, so it has 1 hour on the takt, which means we will only use this engine for a singular hour. So now what we're going to do is start the airplane. So how would you do that, you may ask? It's actually not that hard. So first thing you want to do is push in this thing. This is the mixture, which I'll make an entire video about later. So you push that in. And now we start, and we can click the magnetos, which is this ignition switch, to both. We'll hold it there for a little bit, and since we're starting cold, what we need to do is prime the engine. What priming does is it pumps fuel into the engine, allowing for it to ignite. So we're going to prime 4 times. So that's the 4th prime. And now we go to engine start. So there we have it, and our engine is now started. So now that we have our engine started, we're going to go ahead and go to power up. Watch the RPM meter, which is over here on the right. We want to keep that around 1,000 RPM. And the idle should be just around 600 RPM, which it is. Alright, that's a good thing. Now what we want to do is set these to on. Alright, so let's make sure these all give power the way they're supposed to. So that's, the transponder is now on, and we're going to be squawking 4700. And what that means is we are going to be under normal flight. There's some codes, and I'll get into squawk codes in maybe another video. So now we're going to go ahead and test our alarms here. Alright, we'll wait for that to finish resetting. Alright, so there we go. So now we know that our alarms do work, so in case of a hard landing or something, we will now know whether there's an issue. So, alright, let's see if I can start our GTN 530 here. Welcome to. So I flip those switches, and you're gonna go ahead and normally you'd click this on switch and it should just start it. But it doesn't seem to be starting today, which isn't that big of a deal. Or actually maybe I just have to click the power switch. Maybe. So yeah, that's the power switch on the GTN 530. So now that we have all our systems on, we're gonna go ahead and we're going to release the parking brake. Well, just like that. Now that our parking brake is released, we can start our taxi here. Give it a little bit of power here, just around 10% on the throttle, okay, maybe a 1/4 of an inch forward. And we're going to go ahead and taxi out to runway 11. Now here's a little bit of taxi etiquette advice here. Never taxi any faster than maybe 5 or 10 knots, because it's very hard. Even though the brakes are pretty powerful on this airplane, it's very hard when you're traveling that fast to make the right decisions on taxiing. The last thing we want to do is go off the taxiway. Let's go ahead and start our turn onto this taxiway here. Give it a little bit more power on our taxi here. Not any more than that though, just keep it around 7. So now I'm going to get into taxiing with the toe brakes. Now in the actual airplane you have rudder pedals, and with those rudder pedals what you're able to do is while they also have the function where they move left to right, let me show you guys that now. Where they move left to right, I'm moving them slightly. They have toe brakes, which is what you want to use when you're turning. What you want to memorize, and what my instructor always tells me, is when you're steering the airplane on the ground, drive with your toes. And when you're flying the aircraft, you want to use the rudder with your heels. So let's go ahead, and there's a little staging area, and we'll go ahead and run our power-up checklist. Like our run-up checklist, my bad, not the power-up checklist. It's been a while since I've been in the actual airplane, I'll be 100% honest with you, so we're gonna go ahead and park over there. You can see it coming up now. So we're gonna just slightly step on the toe brakes here. A little bit more pressure on the right toe brake so that we can turn right. Alright, so once we're past that yellow line, we can stop the aircraft. Alright, so we have now successfully stopped our airplane. So the first thing we want to do is set the parking brake. Now we want to look off to our left here. We want to check whether our ailerons do what they're supposed to. So when I provide left yoke, that aileron should go up. And when I provide right yoke, that aileron should come down. That's working, so let's check the right side now. When I go right aileron, that should go up, and when I go left aileron, that should come down. So there we go. And I'm not sure if we can check the, yep, we can check the rear. Alright, so now, when you pull up on the yoke, that should come up, and when you push down, that should go down. And it seems to be doing that. So let's go ahead and check the rudder. Rudder pedal right, rudder pedal left. Alright, that's working. So now we're going to go ahead and power up the engine to around 75% just to test whether it can actually give that kind of power here. So let's go ahead and throttle 75. It does definitely rev pretty fast. So that's throttle at 75%. Go back to idle. So let's go ahead and hit our parking brakes. And let's start our taxi back here. So we're taking off from runway 11, which means it is on a heading of 110 degrees magnetic, and I'm not sure what it is in actual, though navigating with actual heading is a little bit tough, especially when you're in a small G airplane. Usually when you're navigating with actual heading, you're flying an airliner or something. Let's go ahead and start taxi to the runway. We're going to turn left on this upcoming taxiway, not the one we currently passed. Let's give it a little bit more power here. So we're going to give it a little less power here, and we'll kind of just coast onto the taxiway here. Now what we want to do is pull down our flaps one notch. So let's stop the airplane here. Now, I don't have any live ATC right now, or otherwise I'd go into how to communicate with the tower. But as of right now, we don't have that. So let's go ahead and put the flaps down. It's this notch right here. So I'm going to put that down one notch. Now let's go ahead and verify that our flaps are down. Yes, they are. So let's go ahead and close our windows now. We don't want those open during the flight. That would never be a good thing. Alright, windows closed. So let's go ahead and start taxi to the runway. Just give it a little bit of power. You don't need to get there very fast, because overshooting the runway is a no-no. A little bit more power. Once we're in the air, I'll explain a little bit more about this airplane and its quirks. So here we go, turning onto our runway 11. Okay, now that we're on the runway, we can go ahead and start our takeoff roll. So first, throttle up to about halfway in. You can see those RPMs rising. And you'll notice that the plane starts to tilt a little to the left, and I'll explain that once we get in the air, but you want to give it a little bit of rightwards rudder to counteract that. So let's go to 100. And the airspeed indicator, which is right next to our artificial horizon here, should go up to around 60, 65, and the plane will start to rotate on its own. So that's when you start to pull up. A little bit of yoke to the right to counteract that little bit of leftward tendency, which is actually a lot when you're at full throttle. So we're going to go ahead and just try to keep this level for now. And once you reach around 500 feet there, or 900 feet, we're going to go ahead and flaps up one notch. Now that the flaps are up, we can go ahead and cut back a little on throttle. So we'll go down to like 75% throttle for the time being. Now this plane has a severe leftward tendency, and that's because of torque. Now this, you can see that there's a propeller on the front of us, and since there's nothing to counteract that force, the forces of the propeller are put into the body of the airplane, which wants to turn left because this propeller is turning right. So you want to just give it a little bit of rightward. Now in the actual plane you have something called trim, which is not actually simulated very accurately here on the Carenado Cessna 152. But we're going to go ahead and just leave this at straight and level. And the way you know that it's straight and level is if you can put 2 fingers from the dash to the horizon. That's how you'll know if you're going straight and level. I'm not doing a very good job of it here, but usually I don't try to explain while I fly. So we're going to do a loop around the airport before we land here. So I'm going to explain another thing as we start to begin our turn towards the right. So if you look at the artificial horizon, you'll notice there's a little dot in the middle there. Now that dot is the turn coordination. So let's start our turn here and I'll explain exactly what it does. You can see that it's starting to yaw a little bit to the right. So to make up for that, you want to also rudder a little bit to the right. This is to keep the nose up during a turn and prevent your airplane from losing altitude. If you can see the artificial horizon here, we're not losing a lot of altitude during our turn, which is something you want. Now, if you let go of this, you'll immediately see we start to lose height, or possibly gain it, depending on how much back yoke is being provided. But yep, now that we have finished our turn a little bit, still turn coordinating, I'm going to power down a little bit, and I'll explain stuff while we're cruising there. So here we are, I'm going to hold the airplane straight and level. We're going to rise to 2,000 feet and we'll fly a little pattern around the airport here. So we'll pull back a little bit on the yoke. Try to keep the nose aligned with the horizon as much as possible. Give it a little bit more throttle if you sense that the airspeed is dropping a little bit. So I'm actually going to level out at 1600 here because I want to demonstrate a little concept. So we're going to go ahead and start our right turn towards the airport. If we look off to our right, you will see that our airport will come into view. So now we are on what is called our downwind leg. And this means we're flying perpendicular to the airport in preparation for landing. The downwind leg is one of the things you really want to nail flying perpendicular to the airport too, because otherwise you might go a little bit off. It's not as big of a deal in a general aviation aircraft, and the consequences are so much bigger when you're flying a much faster jet aircraft, but overall I want to just fly as close to perpendicular to the airport as possible. Yep. Alright, so we're going to keep this thing level a little bit here. Once we see that we're past the runway, we'll start making a right turn, and we'll start to land on runway 11. Now, realistically, you would not land on the same runway, that you take off from, and that is because of wind. Usually try to take off towards the wind to get yourself a little bit more lift, and you land against it to lose a little bit of lift. But since we're flying in windless conditions here in the simulator, that's not too much of a concern. So we're at 85 knots right now, holding steady. Another tip I have, if you're ever going to end up flying this airplane in real life, is only one hand on the yoke at one time. That just leaves your other hand free to do whatever you need to do in the cockpit, and it's just generally just good flying practice. So we're going to go ahead and just put our sunglasses on. The sun's in the way a little. But, yeah. You can see that leftward tendency having to be counteracted there a little bit. So there we are, and when you're flying by hand and not flying using instruments only, that's called visual flight rules, or as we pilot tend to call it, VFR. Now, you have to use landmarks, so I'm actually going to give you guys one right now. At the airport I'm currently flying at, that right there is the Sikorsky helicopter factory. Now, that factory is considered a landmark for where we start our approach, because it's very large and it sits directly in front of the runway. So we're going to go ahead, and once we get around out over the highway, which you can see is now above us, or underneath us, not above us, what am I saying? But it's underneath us right now. So we're going to go ahead, and once we're past that highway, start a right turn towards the airport. Give it a little less throttle here, we need to start losing a little bit of airspeed. So you can see the airspeed meter now dropping towards down underneath 80. And that's a good thing, because with this airplane, we really need to put out the flaps, which it has multiple purposes during a landing. And we need to be under at least 75 knots to deploy them. So we're going to start losing a little bit of altitude here, and we'll start our right turn towards the airport. Just need to give it just the right amount of turn. So if you see the artificial mantler, we'll see that it's right behind us. So as we start our turn towards the airport, it should come into view. It's now directly to our right, which is fine. So now that we're a little bit under 70, we're going to go ahead and put down our flaps. What this does is it allows us to fly at slower airspeeds at the cost of adding drag. But right now we do need to lose a little bit of speed, so we kind of need drag. So make sure that you keep the airspeed over 60 at all times during the landing, but not higher than maybe 65. Just making sure, keeping the airplane steady here. You can see the runway off there in the distance now. Just coming up on it now. Just a little bit slow here, so I'm going to gain a little bit of speed. And just start dropping in altitude slowly. This is especially when that practice of keeping one hand on the stick at all times kind of comes into play here. Because you need the other one basically on the throttle at all times if you want to have a smooth landing. So we're going to go ahead and start lining up with the runway here. We're a bit low, but that's not too much of a concern. Just watch those trees coming up on our horizon now. We're going to go ahead and give it a little bit more power. We're just around a little less than 50% throttle right now. So we're going to go ahead and cut back on the throttle a little bit. So we're now flying at around 25% throttle, which is just good enough for this glide. we are experiencing a little bit of crosswind here, which is a whole subject, but the point is we're a little bit off where I intended to have us land, but it's still an okay approach here. So once we get over the threshold, which is those lines you see at the front of the runway, is when we're going to go ahead and cut back on the throttle to 0. So we're going to go ahead and we are over the threshold now, cut to 0, and the plane will just start to drop gracefully towards the runway. So you want to just keep the plane stable now, what is called a flare, and that is a great landing. Now just let the nose drop on its own. And once you slow past around 40 knots, as you can see on our airspeed indicator, you can start applying toe brakes. So there's our toe brakes. And now we're going to go ahead and taxi back to the stand where we started out to end our session for today. Just make sure you're, we're a little bit fast here, but that should be okay because we're still on the runway. So once you guys start approaching that yellow line to get back onto the taxiway here, you start to cut back on the throttle, just a little bit of toe brakes towards the left, and a little bit of rudder to steer the nose in the direction you want to go, and just stick with that yellow line. So now in this airport, you'll want to make a right turn here after you get past onto the second yellow line, which would be this one that's currently perpendicular to us. So we're going to go ahead and apply our toe brakes here. Just give us a little bit of toe brake to give us in the right direction. And we're going to go ahead and taxi and park next to those other aircraft that are off in the distance right now. So we'll give it a little bit of power, just a little bit more than 15% on the throttle there. Watch the fuel truck. Just give ourselves using toe brakes and a mix of that and rudder here to go ahead and let us park. So we're going to have to park perpendicular to these aircraft because we do not actually have a realistic way to simulate the way that you'd actually stop this plane and park it like that. So we're going to go ahead, tap the brakes. I'm currently using the toe brakes, but now we're going to go ahead and pull out our parking brake. So parking brake is now out. I can let go of the toe brakes. I can put down the throttle to 0%, and now we can go ahead and start our shutdown checklist. So the first thing you want to actually do is pull the flaps up. We're going to watch them go up here. Okay, flaps up. Now that our flaps are up, we're going to go down here and we're going to go ahead and turn off all the lights, which I did not turn on today because there was no other air traffic in the area. So now we have to go ahead and pull the mixture all the way back, which prevents any fuel to flow to the engine. Now we're going to go ahead and move this switch all the way to off, which means that the magnetos are no longer running. Now we're going to turn off the battery and the alternator, which will shut down the rest of the systems on this aircraft. So there we go. We are now cold and dark. So let's go ahead and start our after takeoff checklist here. So there we go. Door is now open. We're going to go outside. So first thing you want to do is check the propeller, make sure that there's no damage done to the propeller during flight. If we inspect that propeller there, it seems like no damage was taken, which makes sense. We were in the sky and didn't hit any pebbles or anything. Now we're going to go ahead and apply the pitot heat cover, and we're going to add these chocks back on the aircraft. Now the next thing you want to do is go back inside. And now realistically what you do is secure everything back here, but there isn't really anything here except a smoke unit because this is an aerobat aircraft, which means you can have smoke at the back of your airplane. So there we go. Our plane is now stopped, and we're gonna go ahead and close our door here. And there we go. Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the first lesson of hopefully what will become a series on how to fly. So the first flight, like the first lesson, I guess, season, you could call it almost, will be flying the Cessna 152. And this was kind of just an introduction flight and to get you all acquainted with this aircraft, which we'll be flying over the next 6 weeks or so. And in those 6 weeks, I'll let you guys learn basically every little thing about this airplane, all the way down to basically how the plane works, all the way to the hydraulics. So that's gonna be fun. If you guys really like this video, go ahead and like and subscribe. You know, do your thing. Hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did making it, and I'll see you next week, I guess.